Why do we believe in progress when history only tells us of decline? Is the fate of every civilization to rise in blind ambition, only to crumble under the weight of its own illusions? History does not unfold as a steady ascent toward a glorious future. Rather, it pulses in cycles, each civilization doomed to follow the same tragic arc. From barbarism to power, from power to decadence, from decadence to ruin. In the decline of the West, the inescapable conclusion is drawn. Our modern world, with all its technical prowess, cultural achievements, and economic systems, is not on the path to a new era of enlightenment, but instead, marching steadily toward its dissolution. The signs of decay are everywhere. The spiritual vitality that once animated societies, the force that built cathedrals, wrote epics, and waged wars of meaning, is now exhausted. We exist in an age of calculation, where everything is measured in numbers and utility, where the soul of a civilization has been replaced by statistics and bureaucracy. It is the age of civilization, as opposed to culture, a distinction that marks the beginning of the end. Culture is organic, breathing life into its people through myth, art, and belief. Civilization is its petrification, an empty husk obsessed with comfort, security, and efficiency. The West, like all great civilizations before it, is past its peak. We are not at the beginning of something new. We are in the late decadent phase. Our politics are a spectacle. Our philosophies are weak. Our arts lack soul. The creative will that once drove the West forward has faded, leaving behind only a mechanical repetition of past forms. We innovate in technique, but not in vision. We expand in wealth, but not in depth. We amuse ourselves to death, drowning in trivial distractions while avoiding the terrifying reality of decline. The masses believe in progress because they must. The illusion of perpetual advancement is a necessary narcotic, shielding them from the reality that all things decay. They place faith in democracy, in technology, in endless economic growth. But these are the desperate hopes of a civilization that has lost its direction. The West does not march toward a brighter future. It stumbles blindly toward its inevitable dusk. Every great civilization has followed the same cycle. The heroic age, in which its people are driven by a higher purpose, gives way to an age of conquest and expansion. At its zenith, it believes itself eternal, convinced that its power, wealth, and achievements will never fade. But then, slowly the rot sets in. The cultural soul weakens, its spiritual foundations are questioned, and the great myths that once gave meaning to existence crumble under the weight of skepticism. The civilization loses faith in itself. We see it today. In the triumph of the last man, the comfortable, risk-averse being who seeks nothing beyond personal pleasure. Where once there was will, now there is only desire. Where once there was struggle, now there is only distraction. Art becomes decoration. Politics becomes theater. Science becomes industry. The people, once shaped by hardship and ambition, become soft, lazy, cynical. They take their civilization for granted, forgetting that it was built on the sacrifices of those who came before. And so, power shifts. It always does. New forces, hardened by necessity, rise on the fringes. In the past, it was the barbarians who overran Rome, the Turks who seized Byzantium, the revolutionaries who shattered the old orders of Europe. In our age, the challengers will be different, but the pattern remains unchanged. The cycle turns, and the West, having exhausted its strength, will be overtaken, not necessarily by a foreign enemy, but by its own internal collapse. The world moves according to forces greater than human will. No leader, no ideology, no innovation can reverse the inevitable. The West has entered its winter, and the snows of history will soon bury it. The tragedy of a civilization in decline is that it does not recognize its own fall. It mistakes motion for progress, complexity for intelligence, wealth for vitality. It continues to build, to expand, to refine its technologies. But beneath the surface, the essential force that once drove it forward has died. The great thinkers of the past gave form to an age. Today, philosophy is reduced to sterile academic exercises. The art that once conveyed the soul of a people now serves only as entertainment or provocation without depth. The leaders who once embodied vision and strength are now mere functionaries, speaking endlessly but saying nothing. This is the fate of all civilizations. The moment they reach the height of their power, the seeds of their decay have already taken root. Strength creates comfort. Comfort breeds weakness. Weakness invites collapse. It is not war or invasion that ends an empire. It is exhaustion. The West has spent centuries building its vast economic, political, and scientific structures, but in doing so, it has emptied itself of meaning. It has conquered the material world, but lost its spirit. We see this in the way modern societies reject their own past. The traditions that once defined them are cast aside as relics of a primitive age. The virtues that built them, discipline, sacrifice, belief, are dismissed as oppressive or outdated. The heroes of history are deconstructed and criticized, their statues torn down, their legacies rewritten. A civilization that no longer honors its ancestors is one that has no future. In its place, we have an illusion of progress. But what is this progress? More technology, more consumption, more distractions, none of which provide a deeper purpose. The pursuit of truth has been replaced by the pursuit of comfort. Instead of striving toward greatness, we settle for convenience. Instead of seeking meaning, we seek entertainment. The modern individual, liberated from all higher ideals, drifts aimlessly, seeking happiness in trivial pleasures that cannot sustain the soul. The cycle is nearing its end. The West, having built the most powerful civilization in history, now faces the inevitable fate of all great cultures before it. It will not end in a single moment of catastrophe, but in a long, slow descent, one marked by decadence, confusion, and an increasing sense of futility. And when it finally falls, the world will not mourn. It will simply move on, as it always has, to the next cycle of rise and decline. A civilization at its peak believes itself eternal. It assumes that its institutions will persist, that its ideals will remain unquestioned, that its dominance will be unchallenged. It mistakes its present stability for a universal law, failing to see that stability itself is only a brief pause in the ceaseless movement of history. The West, despite its technological advances and global influence, is no exception. The signs of decay are clear to those who dare to look beyond the comforting illusions of progress. A society in decline becomes obsessed with preserving itself, not through strength or vision, but through bureaucracy, regulation, and the enforcement of fragile ideological constructs. It fears conflict, not because it is wise, but because it has lost the will to fight. It preaches tolerance, not because it is noble, but because it lacks conviction. It celebrates diversity, not out of a deep cultural richness, but because it no longer possesses a strong culture of its own. When a civilization reaches this stage, its fate is sealed, not by external enemies, but by the slow erosion of its internal foundations. What is left to sustain it? Wealth? Military strength? Scientific advancement? These are tools, not guiding principles. Without a unifying spirit, without a sense of purpose greater than survival or comfort, these achievements become hollow. The Greeks had philosophy, Rome had law, the medieval world had faith. The West once had its own guiding forces, its pursuit of knowledge, its belief in reason, its cultural identity. Now, even these are questioned, deconstructed, dismantled. We are left with nothing but an endless search for distraction, for novelty, for fleeting gratification. The individual, too, mirrors the decline of the civilization. He has everything and yet feels empty. He has infinite access to information, yet understands nothing. He is more connected than ever before, yet lonelier than in any previous age. He is free to shape his own identity, yet finds himself directionless, paralyzed by choice. He no longer serves a cause greater than himself, for no such cause remains. In this world of abundance, he is impoverished in the only way that matters, spiritually. The descent is irreversible. No civilization that has entered its final stage has ever turned back. It does not collapse in a dramatic moment, but rather dissolves, piece by piece, as its people cease to believe in it, as its institutions rot from within, as its enemies, both internal and external, sense its weakness and prepare to take their place in the next cycle of history. The West does not face an immediate catastrophe, but something far worse, a slow, inevitable erosion into irrelevance. The illusion of permanence blinds civilizations to their own fragility. They believe they can escape the fate of those who came before them, that their systems are too advanced, their economies too strong, their institutions too deeply rooted to ever fail. But history tells another story. No civilization, no matter how powerful, has ever defied the laws of rise and fall. The West, now deep in its late stage, is not an exception. It is merely another chapter in the long, repetitive cycle of human history. The signs are unmistakable. The ruling elites, once driven by vision and ambition, now exist only to maintain their own power, offering nothing new, nothing bold, only the endless management of decline. The culture, once rich with meaning and expression, has become either a meaningless echo of past greatness or a desperate attempt to provoke, to shock, to simulate creativity in a world that has lost its soul. The masses, softened by comfort, no longer seek greatness. They seek distraction. They drown in entertainment, in consumption, in fleeting pleasures, numbing themselves to the growing emptiness of their existence. A civilization that no longer believes in itself will not survive. It may continue to function on the surface, its buildings standing, its economy running, its institutions appearing intact. But beneath it all, the core is hollow. A society cannot thrive without faith in its own destiny, and the West has lost that faith. It questions its own foundations, dismantles its own traditions, ridicules its own heroes, and embraces a future without direction or purpose. This is not progress. It is the final symptom of exhaustion. Some will argue that the decline can be reversed, that reform or innovation can restore the spirit of a civilization. But this is a fantasy. A decaying world does not give birth to renewal. It merely drifts toward its inevitable end. The barbarians who once stormed the gates of Rome were not the cause of its fall. They were the result of it. The real destruction comes from within, from the slow unraveling of will, from the surrender to decadence, from the loss of belief in anything higher than momentary gratification. The West, for all its achievements, is now only a shadow of what it once was. Its people, though richer than any before them, are spiritually destitute. Its leaders, though powerful, are without vision. Its culture, though technologically advanced, is empty of meaning. And so, the cycle continues, as it always has, toward the inevitable descent into irrelevance. The decline of a civilization does not come as a sudden collapse, but as a gradual erosion. At first, the signs are subtle. A loss of ambition, a weakening of cultural confidence, a shift from creation to mere consumption. The West has entered this phase. It has conquered the external world, but lost itself in the process. It has built great cities, vast economies, and technological wonders. Yet the soul that once animated these achievements has faded. What remains is a civilization living off the momentum of its past, coasting on the achievements of those who came before. The illusion of progress sustains the masses for now. They believe that new technology, new policies, and new ideologies will solve the problems of the modern world. But these are mere surface-level distractions from the deeper truth. The West has no higher purpose left to pursue. It no longer aspires to greatness. Instead, it seeks only comfort, ease, and the endless prolongation of a system that is already crumbling from within. Its institutions, once sources of strength, are now paralyzed by bureaucracy and internal conflict. Its cultural identity, once a source of pride, is now viewed with skepticism or outright disdain. This is the end stage of every great civilization. First comes expansion, then dominance, then decadence, and finally, disintegration. The West, having passed through its heroic and imperial phases, now lingers in the final stage, an era of confusion, of directionless drift, of a people who no longer believe in the civilization they inhabit. The signs are everywhere: a political class incapable of decisive action, a culture that no longer produces anything of depth, a society obsessed with trivial pleasures, but unable to confront serious existential questions. The last men, as Nietzsche foresaw, have arrived. They do not strive for greatness. They seek only amusement. They do not build for the future. They live for the present. They do not fight for ideals. They laugh at them. They do not create. They consume. And as they drift, as their civilization weakens, others, stronger, hungrier, more willing to struggle, prepare to take their place. The West will not fall in fire and chaos. It will dissolve in apathy. There will be no dramatic collapse, no single event marking its end, only a slow decline into irrelevance as its people forget who they were, as they trade their inheritance for momentary pleasures, as they surrender, not to an external enemy, but to their own exhaustion. The decline of the West is not a prophecy, it is an observation. The pattern has played out before, again and again, across history. A civilization rises, not through comfort, but through struggle. It reaches its heights, not through ease, but through sacrifice. It holds its place, not through wealth alone, but through a shared belief in its destiny. But then, when the peak is passed, comes the long descent. The discipline that built the empire is forgotten. The virtues that once defined a people are ridiculed. The hunger for greatness is replaced by an obsession with pleasure. The civilization, in its old age, no longer seeks to shape the world. It seeks only to be left alone, to enjoy what little time it has left before the inevitable end. The final stage is marked by exhaustion, not only of the body, but of the spirit. The people no longer believe in their own civilization. They grow cynical, indifferent, detached. They no longer create, they consume. They no longer admire strength, they resent it. They no longer defend their traditions, they abandon them. The symbols of their greatness become objects of mockery. The myths that once inspired them are rewritten, deconstructed, erased, and all the while they tell themselves that this is progress, that they are moving forward, when in truth they are only drifting downward. We see it everywhere, a world drowning in distractions, in trivial debates, in endless entertainment, a culture obsessed with the surface but blind to what lies beneath. Politics reduced to empty theater, art stripped of depth, philosophy replaced by empty slogans, science, once the pursuit of truth, now shackled to profit and ideology. Education, once the foundation of civilization, turned into a mechanism for conformity rather than thought. The West still stands, but it no longer knows why. And so, history moves forward, not in a straight line, not towards some utopian future, but in cycles. The West is not immune to this. It will not be the first to fall, nor the last. As one civilization fades, another prepares to take its place. Those who remain comfortable in their illusions will be caught off guard. Those who understand history will not. The age of heroes is over. The age of comfort is ending. The age of decline is here. And what comes next, chaos, transformation, or the birth of something new, will be decided not by those who seek comfort, but by those who are willing to struggle. The end of a civilization does not come with a great explosion, nor with the dramatic finality of a single event. It comes in silence, in slow decay, in forgotten traditions and lost convictions. It comes when a people no longer have the will to preserve what their ancestors built, when they abandon the struggle that once gave their society its strength. It comes when comfort replaces courage, when convenience replaces purpose, when decadence replaces discipline. The West has entered this final phase, the quiet unraveling of everything that once made it great. The illusions will persist for a time, the institutions will still function, the economies will still move, the cities will still shine. But beneath it all, the emptiness grows. The people feel it. The deep, unspoken sense that something is wrong, that something is missing. They drown it in distractions, in entertainment, in consumerism, in meaningless political battles that change nothing. But the feeling remains, gnawing at the edges of consciousness, the sense that this world is built on a foundation that is already crumbling. And so, history moves forward, indifferent to those who refuse to see. The cycle continues. The West, once the dominant force in the world, now drifts toward irrelevance. Perhaps it will endure in some form, fragmented, changed beyond recognition. Or perhaps it will fade entirely, leaving only ruins and echoes for future civilizations to study. Whatever the outcome, one truth remains. Nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not ideologies, not even the illusion of progress. What remains then for the individual? To watch as the world declines, to participate in its slow decay, or to seek something beyond, something higher, something that does not depend on the fleeting structures of a dying age. The answer is for each to find on their own. Some will surrender to the collapse, lost in distraction and despair. But others, those who still understand struggle, who still believe in something beyond mere survival, will search for meaning beyond the ruins. The night is falling, and the age of comfort is ending. What remains is the question that has haunted humanity since the beginning. When the world around you crumbles, what will you become? If these thoughts have stirred something within you, do not let them fade. The search for truth is not a solitary endeavor. Stay, read, listen. This journey is not over.